we're going to be playing some other games today, too, that we're excited to debut in some games tomorrow. We're going to be talking about serious games and play and innovation and all sorts of stuff. Last year, when I gave my summit talk, it was more of a retrospective talk, and it talked about the history of the company and kind of how things evolved and how it started with one customer, Qualcomm, and then it continued to grow. This year, we're going to talk about the evolution of the company in a kind of different perspective and what we need to do, all of us, to produce the business results we want. And we're going to start with this notion of multidimensional play. And I'm going to tease that out, and I'm going to try and help make it clear what we need to embrace and then how we might go about that. And so I think we should start with this notion of, well, what happens when we allow ourselves to think or approach a problem from a multi-dimensional perspective. Now, I'm going to try and show YouTube videos in my presentation, so there's always a little bit of a risk with that. So we'll see if I can pull this off.
But from where?
He's intelligent, but not experienced. This pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking.
Full stop.
Full stop, sir.
Z minus 10,000 meters. Stand by photon torpedoes.
Torpedoes ready, sir.
Look sharp.
Fire!
So, what does this teach us other than this room has awesome sound? What does this teach us? How did Kirk win? Thank you, Hart. That was kind of an easy one right there. Right? Yeah, come on. How did he win? Yes, he won through multi-dimensional thinking. That's the benefits. He found a way. And I love that, you love that scene of brilliant acting. Of course, William Shatner is such a brilliant actor. But that where he's like, aha, I know I'm going to win. I'm going to go behind him. Aha. But yet, it was multidimensional thinking. So we're going to start by looking at some successes. I'm going to give just two from our own work this year. Traditional kind of bread and butter innovation games, Customer Advisory Board at the GE Intelligent Platforms User Summit. This was just a few weeks ago. We played a whole series of games over a full day with their customers, Missing Pieces, Destroy My Deck, Buy a Feature, a few other things, and traditional stuff. Great results, great outcomes. They're processing, building out their roadmaps from it. Stuff that we all know. The other one that we did was a very large Scrum team retrospective. bwin Party is a real money gaming company out of Gibraltar. They have 4 main development locations, a very large development location in India. They've been through an agile transformation. They wanted to know how their teams were doing. So we didn't do a team retrospective of 8 people, and we didn't do 40 people in a room. We did almost 400 people online in a week with a 42-person, or a 42 team, sorry, not 42 people, 42 team Scrum team retrospective. And then because we're now in a digital world, we were able to download the results, mine the propellers, mine the anchors, and create a visualization of where the opportunities for organizational improvement existed, as opposed to team improvement. Organizational improvement. So what I want you to do now is take 3 or 4 minutes at your table and identify one of your successes this year and talk about it. And that success could be associated directly with innovation games, or it could be, if you're more new to this world, it could be just, here's a success that we had that was in a collaborative means of working. Go. So do you think that those successes had a positive impact in your business, and your desires and your goals and your ability to achieve those goals? Yes? Well, that feeling is actually supported by the research that we're seeing about what is collaboration's impact in business. We're finding that organizations who collaborate effectively, from studies from Gartner and other places, they can get 2 times market share. Now, that's kind of interesting. Not just feels good, like, wow, market share. They can get 3 times product success rates through collaboration. And we're seeing possibly even better rates with some of the lean startup practices of customer co-development and experimentation and rapid feedback. Hart's going to talk a little bit about that, just how some of these structures can create these amazing successes. There's a downside, too, for the lack of collaboration. We've all been in those unproductive meetings, right? And that's a pretty big number of unproductive meetings. I come into the room, I don't know what's going on. Why am I here? Am I the right person? What am I supposed to do? Huh? And the thing that's really coming out loud and clear, and I read a lot of magazines, and you can kind of track in your mind kind of the stuff that's going on by what they're writing about. The stuff they're writing about now is engagement in the workforce, right? And the studies about engagement and how, especially with millennials, and you're seeing this, I want to be more engaged, I want to be involved. And the number here is astonishing. $500 billion estimated to be lost, wasted, through frustration and dissatisfaction. I'm not engaged at work. Come in. Come in. I remember one of the stories I heard about dissatisfaction was an organization that adopted Agile practices, felt like they were cooking along. A new leader came in, didn't like Agile, and made them go back to waterfall. And I remember the developers, this is one of the Agile conferences, one of the developers said, I went from coming in early and staying late to coming in exactly at 9:05 and leaving exactly at 4:55. Because I just couldn't take it any more minute. And yes, I'm looking for a new job. That astonishing. And so we know we want to collaborate better. And at some level we think, oh, collaboration, that's easy. Yeah, just give us a whiteboard, put us in a room, we'll be fine. Because that's kind of how we're biologically optimized. We're optimized to be, collaborating in small groups. And even that can be hard because sometimes you don't know what's going on. Why am I here again? How do I interact? Should I say something? Well, this person's going to do this thing and we don't have the budget. So collaboration maybe isn't so easy, but we often figure it out. Small groups are amazingly resilient at trying to figure out collaboration. And if you give them a bit of time and you give them enough of rope and you give them a little bit of a goal, they kind of figure out how to collaborate because we want to. In organizational behavior terms, this is called a shared transactional memory system. We learn about each other through our interactions, and we start to figure out how to play to each other's strengths because we all want to hit that home run. Right, Sue? We all want to hit that home run. And so what happens then is we think, oh, I'm having this good collaborative experience. Let's scale it. Let's make it a really big collaboration. Let's get 100 people. No, let's get 1,000 people. We'll collaborate. And that's an absolute massive epic failure. Because while you can have common values, things that you hold important, and you can have a common ambition, we want to put a man on the moon, you can't collaborate in large group size. There is no evidence in human history that we collaborate in large group size. Large group size devolves into a broadcast model. It's not a collaboration model. And we talk about this all the time, like, how do I architect my software system so I can have multiple independent teams working together and synchronizing their work? And so what we're finding is that the unit of work at scale is, in fact, the team. So we once again return to, how do I help that team be more effective? And how do I help the teams of teams be more effective? Because they have to collaborate both within the team and across the teams. The collaboration is really tricky. And we want to do this better. We want to be more effective because the numbers are real and they're important. Well, we have a tool for this. Games are the ideal collaboration tool. Games have 4 components. They have a goal, something we want to achieve, and that goal is clear. We have constraints, and in the game community, these are called arbitrary constraints. Why does Scrabble have 7 letters? It could have 7, or it could have 8, it could have 6. 7 seems about right. But it's chosen arbitrarily. Over time, games evolve to have a right level of hardness, a hardness that's engaging. There's rules. How do we behave, both if it's a single-player game with the game, with other players, collaborative play? How do we behave with each other? Some games, like NASCAR, are about breaking the rules. See if you can get caught, not get caught. Calvin ball. Person who has the ball makes the next rule. But games have rules. And voluntary participation. This notion that I would like to do this. I choose to do this. So let's check this. Let's check what we talk about with serious games and the notion of games as a collaboration tool. And let's pick one that is possibly the most well-known of the games that we do, speedboat or sailboat. Possibly the most well-known. So what's the goal? Does it have a goal? Uncover a problem. Okay? What are the constraints? What? The wall. Is the wall. The physical constraint is the wall. Agreed? That is a constraint. What are the other constraints? Participants? Yep. Or lack thereof. Is a focus on the negative a constraint or a rule? It's a rule. Right? And this is where sometimes it gets a little tricky to figure out rules versus constraints. Well, let's now further go with the rules. What are the rules in speedboat? One item per sticky. What else is a rule in speedboat? Right, anchors go below the water. If you're using propellers, they go above. Any other rules? The deeper the anchor, the worse it is. The rule that isn't a rule, which is you can write down anything you want, right? Which is, in a sense, a lack of a constraint. I have a blog post on my favorite anchor so far of all time in a team doing a process improvement was the Pepsi anchor. Someone wrote Pepsi, put it on the speedboat. Interesting. Why Pepsi? Oh, I'll tell you why. You think all developers want Diet Coke. I want Pepsi. If you want me to be more productive, you'll get Pepsi. I'm like, okay, we can fix that one. Pepsi. So in our world, this works. Now, what isn't in the definition of a game? It's a 3-letter word. And there's lots of fun 3-letter words, but it's a 3-letter word that we often associate with game. Fun. But fun isn't a definition of a game, it's a relationship that we have to a game. Some people find it fun to try and form a word out of 7 tiles. Some people don't. And we choose to play the games that we find fun. That's the notion of voluntary participation. But we've had this interesting discussion at Centennial for the last year about the word fun. Because I came home one day and, one of my daughters, Dad, how was your day at work? Oh, I had a blast. It was a really fun day. And she goes, because she knows I play, right? And she's in 3rd grade at the time. What games did you play, Dad? I'm like, I didn't really play games today, but I played some games and it was really fun. She goes, oh, because her notion of fun is pleasure. But what's an adult notion of fun? Not boring. No awareness of time, flow, state of flow. To Tarang's point, they've actually done brain scan studies of children playing and being fully engaged, and brain scans of adults being fully engaged at work. They're identical. They're both in the state of flow. So that's the feeling of fun. And going back to the $500 billion number of lack of engagement or dissatisfaction, adult fun is engagement. It's satisfaction. It's having an impact. I go to work, I have an impact, I have fun. And it's our code word. Because it's hard to walk around saying, I had a highly engaging, deeply satisfying, thoroughly impactful day today. We just code it and say, I had fun today. And adult fun is all those things. It means all those things. So we know that games can help. Games are an ideal collaboration tool. But all of you who've been through the training and all of you who are facilitators and producers, you've learned and you've internalized that the game alone does not define success. We don't, as a producer, we don't instantly walk into a room with no planning and say, oh, let's buy a feature. That's not going to work, right? We put some thought into it. What are the features and what's going on? So if you've been through the training and you've read the book, or at least if you bought the book, that would make me happy. But if you read it, even happier. We have this process, right? And simplifying a bit, we start with, what's your goal? Because we don't have a game, we have a collection of games, and we want to map the game to the goal. And then, who should play, right? And what are the games that fit? And then from the games that fit, we can help you navigate to the game that you're going to actually play. Because we know that sometimes there's a couple of games that kind of fit the space and you want to pick from there. And we put these into a process, and the process maps into human cognition. So I can have divergent thinking, I can have sense making, and I can have prioritization or process improvement. And when you start to think about this in terms of the goal, you start to realize, wait a minute, I am thinking multidimensionally. I'm starting to think in multiple dimensions because I can tease these out and I can start to think of these dimensions. So I can look at my goal and then I can look at who, right? Is it internal with my employees? Or is it external, outside the company, with my customers or my partners or my suppliers? And I start to think about this dimensionality. And you realize that when we're in the book, I think at this line of our evolution, we were at 2.5 dimensional thinking. 2.5. Because the book was in person, it was predominantly designed for customer engagement, although you do use it internally, and we were very clear that you got to have a goal, and we want to sequence this. And my friend Scotty, if you haven't met Scotty Belvey, you should really make sure he gets in your network, because he's very good at thinking about the time element of sequencing. Like, okay, how do I take this outcome and flow it into this outcome so I can get the larger business objective solved? So at this moment, we're 2.5 dimensional thinking. And then something happened that was really profound. I got SAP as a client. And SAP came to me and said, some of you have heard this story, so you get to hear it again. SAP said, Luke, this buy a feature thing, we're working with the design services team in Deer Creek in Palo Alto, Matthew Holloway, Andrew Williams, and this stuff is so amazing, you got to put it online. Online? I'm supposed to put the games online? I didn't write a book about online. There's nothing in my book about online. Has anyone read the book and noticed there's nothing online? Have you noticed that? It wasn't supposed to be online. And so of course, right? I'm not that smart, and I say, I don't want to put the games online. The book, it wasn't intended to be online. That's not what we want to do. It wasn't what the design was. Well, Luke, I'm your customer. You're teaching us to listen to our customers, and I'm your customer, and I'm asking you to listen to me. You see how I did that? So I want you to put the games online. And I'm thinking, okay, I got to dig my heels in. So then I say, I don't have the money to do this. Sorry, Andy. And he goes, oh, that's not a problem. See, I'm a vice president at SAP. I can write you a check if I feel like it. But I'm not going to, because if I write you a check, you won't believe that it's the right thing to do. And when the money runs out, you won't keep going. So here's what I will do. I'm going to hire you for a month, and you're going to write a report about whether or not it's a good idea to put the games online. Like, oh, you got me. So I did. Took a project, did some research. Continue is also a member of the the Qualitative Consultants Research Association, the largest independent body of market researchers, qualitative market researchers. And I thought, okay, I'll go to my peers in that community and we'll look and see if online can produce better results. Like, what do we know about online? And lo and behold, there are many cases, and some of those came up in the last couple of days, where online actually produces better results than in person. Now, in the qualitative research community, those results typically are associated with what are called the taboo topics. Things like religious practices or financial habits or sexual practices or drug use, things like that, where you get provably better results if you go online than with a human asking questions or interviewing. And I started to think, okay, some of these games really could be better online, maybe. And so that moment, that realization moved us into another dimension, the modality dimension of in-person and online. And now we have this 4-dimensional space that we're navigating. And we're even exploring things that we don't even have a good name for, where we have an iPad game, Nosy, that you play online but in person in a group. What do we call that? Hybrid? Blended? What do we do with that? How do we work with that? So we start to have this really great, powerful, and this is just a nod to the history part. This is the original prototype of Buy a Feature. And I'm so excited he's here. Scott's in the room, and you can see Scott was part of the very first version of Buy a Feature. This was when Scala was just out. Lift as the UI framework didn't even exist. David Pollack was a developer that we had hired who's the inventor of Lift to do this work, and it looked like this. Notice, you guys will find it very interesting, the features were laid out across the top and the people on the bottom. That's because we thought the math would be easier and better, right? Then it became this. This is the first version we started playing with customers. And you can see the word "in this channel." We thought at the time, let's do this really sophisticated chat system where you could have channels associated with each feature, and we're going to separate them. And then we created private chats so that you could navigate between the channels. And what we found through our testing was that customers hated the channels, but they were using the whispering feature to negotiate. So that's why we have a single chat, because people didn't want the channels. Now, that doesn't mean some of the ideas that we've received from you about item comments and rankings and things like that aren't important. They are, but notice that this evolution occurred. And now, of course, we've got Colin and John and beautiful designers, and we've got something that looks like this, right? And there's so much more power, and yet the core element has stayed the same, this notion of this game. And this multidimensional space has given us this great opportunity to improve, because once we start in this multidimensional space and you get through that sequence, you're engaging in multi-dimensional thinking and you get into a spot. And you might say, oh, okay, what I want to do is I want to have customers play online to get ideas. And then I want to take those results and I want to move them internally with my employees and get their ideas. But since they're employees and they're in my team, I'm going to do it in person. And then I'm going to take those ideas and I'm going to go prioritize them. And we start to navigate through this three-dimensional space, this four-dimensional space. But it turns out when you really start digging into this that 4D gaming is good, but it's not good enough. Four-dimensional thinking is not even good enough for what we want to do to solve the collaboration problems that we have. We have to go further than that. We have to push that boundary even more. Because when you hit that dot, you suddenly realize there's dimensions in that dot that are relevant to what we need to accomplish. So what are those? Well, one is scale. Do I want to do a single team or do I want to do multi-team? And notice that we use slightly different terminology. The gaming community will say it's single player, multiplayer, or massive multiplayer. But in business, the unit is team, predominantly. So we're going to talk about single player, single team, multi-team. And it may seem weird to think of teams of customers, but what you're going to find in the next 3 to 5 years is that your customers are going to find that they like the social bonds of play so much that they're going to stay a unit as customers to give you feedback. And you do that now, you just call it a customer advisory board. Yesterday, Rackspace was giving a presentation about how they do their customer advisory board, and Wes Bright said, oh, we're doing a customer advisory board, and it's a pretty common structure. We've got customers who sign up. They agree to 3 in-person meetings over an 18-month period. They just formed a team. And that team wants to play together. They want to help. But there's more dimensions. Segmentation, right? Do I want similar people? If I'm playing internally, do I want like all my salespeople, or do I want my salespeople mixed up with my service with my devs? And segmentation is a huge untapped opportunity for us because right now we use a totally ugly blunt knife called demographic attribute to segment. Ew, right? It's like doing surgery with the edge of a wooden ruler. Ew, it hurts. It doesn't even work as well as we want. It works better than nothing, but it doesn't work. What we really want is we want to know how you think so we can find the right people to put them in the right kind of game for the right kind of problem that we're solving. We want to look at psychographics as segmentation. And we have the dimension of time. When we started the games, both from the in-person and when we went online, they were all real-time, synchronous. And what we kept getting from our customers, and this time we're smart enough to listen, is, Luke, we need long-running games. Oh, okay, why do you need long-running games? Because I'm trying to get a game going with 5 locations around the world, and we can't all be in the game at the same time, so give us long-running games. What they're saying is, hey, Contenio, give us more dimensions, because the problems we're facing in business need that dimension to solve. We need you to cover that multidimensional space. We need to cover that multidimensional space. And we start to realize that this multidimensional space is really important because when we become more multidimensional, we create better and more options for solving our business problems. And every single attempt to reduce the multidimensional space ultimately fails. Because you can't arbitrarily lop off permanently a part of the space. Oh, the internet is here, we don't need to meet in person anymore, we're just going to do our ideation online. Really? Oh, the internet, that's a fad. We still need to be in person. Oh, really? Every time we purposefully lop off part of that space, we limit our ability to meet our business objective. And our job has to do that. And that, in fact, and before the summit, we work together as a team. That, in fact, is our mission. Our mission here at Centennial is to create organizations that embrace this multidimensional space, because this is what we believe. We believe that empowered, collaborating teams are our best chance to solve the problems we're facing. And I don't mean the problems of business, I mean the problems of the world. Ranging from, you name it. We don't have water in California. We better figure out how to collaborate to get that done, because part of the problem is, and a big part of the problem is, we don't know how to collaborate about water in California. Not just what's my roadmap. How do I fix bullying? How do we prepare our children for education? How do we help them navigate this complex world? How do I make choices in business by involving the right people so that when the decision is made, it sticks and we can get to work? So how do you do this? How do you become more multidimensional? And hopefully, how do you do it faster than I did and with less beatings by people like SAP on my head? So how do you do this? How do you become more how do you become better equipped to meet the needs of the business complexities that you're facing? Well, the first is find your zone. Start with a place in that multidimensional space that you know you feel good about. I don't know about y'all, but I feel pretty comfortable producing and facilitating an in-person product box game. Hard to screw that one up, right? Katie, you feel good about that spot. I know, that's the favorite game of Reed Elsevier, product box. We like that game. What, right? Okay. I also feel really pretty good about facilitating by a feature online. That's another zone that I feel really happy about. Really like that zone. So you should take a moment and reflect and think about where you are in your journey, where you are in your space, and find that spot. Find that spot of power, of comfort, of ability. Because that's where you start from. And the corollary is you can't make anyone else wrong about where they start. Because where they start is where they start. The next step is pick a spot of that multidimensional space where you feel uncomfortable, where you're not as so sure about what to do and how to do it. Find a dimension that you haven't pushed. Luke, I get it. I'm totally comfortable. We've played Prune the Product Tree in my development team, and it's worked really well. How many people played? 8, just like you said. It was great. Okay, now I want you to do 10 Prune the Product Trees across 80 people with 4 more facilitators. Oh, dude. Haven't done that yet. Then that's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. You need to find that spot. Oh, Luke, you don't understand, which is often common, but Luke, you don't understand. We're really comfortable with doing, Prune the Product Tree and in-person games at our customer advisory board. We've got 18 people in our customer advisory board. Okay. Dan and Scott will tell you about a 500-person game that we produce for Intuit. Find a spot in the multidimensional space where you feel uncomfortable and go there and try it out. Because when you become more multidimensional, you create more options to solve the business problems that you're facing. And by closure, the organization becomes more capable. We're here to help. That's our job. How do we help? Well, we want to provide gaming platforms. So we have Innovation Games. We have Nosy. We're going to play Nosy today, but we're not going to play the in-person game. Or the online game. We're going to play the in-person game. So we can still push that boundary. We've got our new platform that we're going to play tomorrow, Strategy Engine. We also, as you know, embrace in-person play. This is part of our philanthropic work with San Jose, where we have hundreds of citizens, and many people in this room have facilitated at that event and contributed time, where we have hundreds of citizens grappling with the city budget and trying to make choices that help it become balanced. We've talked about ways to play, but play needs a space, right? Because part of the constraints that we were talking about was the wall and the space. So Société Générale has progressed in such a way that they have rooms devoted to play. Because it's really hard in corporate America or corporations around the world to walk around and say, oh, let's just throw prune the product trees up in our cubes and get the right space, and then you're all noisy and you're disturbing other people and it's not so good. So why don't we create spaces for play, which has materials and lists of facilitators and opportunities to engage. And we can do those things and we can book the room for a full week, and then we can take the artifacts that we need back to our areas of work. We also have, traditional ways to play with advisory boards, and of course there's training. So these are all of the ways that we want to support you in this process. And it's not Centennial. It's all of us. There's Deb Colden. You got a chance to take her class? Brilliant, wonderful person. We've got, I believe we've either hit or we're just under 4,000 trained facilitators. And what's cool about that number is it goes up in a way that I'm not always tracking, because we've got more than 20 qualified instructors around the world. And that number's growing too. And we're going to keep pushing that limit, keep pushing that boundary. So and this community is going to keep growing, and it's going to keep growing in a lot of ways. So we're here to help. Now, to show you the progress that we think we've made in helping you, I want, and this is also a shout out to the team and a shout out to our customers, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments so that you know what we've done this year and then where we're headed. So some of the things we've done. Well, the big one probably is Strategy Engine. That has been released in 2 forms. It's a philanthropic form that got released in July called Common Ground for Action, that was created in collaboration with the Kettering Foundation. And then it was branded, and it will be, and it's being used and released for corporate America, or corporations around the world, not corporate America, but corporations around the world. And we'll do some work on that tomorrow. And really exciting. It's some of the best work we've done to date. Really complex visualizations, really interesting problems that you can solve. A way to frame it, just so you know, is if you're a product manager or a project manager, and you've got a list of features that are, say, a collection of, 100,000 to 300,000 features in terms of cost, you put them in by a feature, you figure out what to do. Okay, great. If you're a project manager and you've got your marketing project portfolio and you've got to figure out which marketing projects to do, well, great. Buy a project, buy a feature. But let's say you're a corporation and you're facing a strategic decision of, say, $20 million or more. And one of the examples we use is, I've expanded into Brazil. It's not going well. What do I do? Do I stop? Do I change? Or do I persevere? That's a decision that's not a buy a feature decision. It's a decision that requires a different decision-making process embodied by a different kind of tool. So as a rule, you can think of it as a rule of thumb. If the decision is $10 million or more, it's probably more of a strategy engine decision. If it's something about a collection of items that you're trying to figure out, it's probably more of a buy a feature. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. There's been a number of platform improvements, and I'm going to kind of tease them out. We've moved from complex URLs to simple game IDs. We've got mechanisms for sharing it. We've heard from our customers we really needed to beef up the ability to change browsers, or if a person loses connection, bring them back into the same game. In a sense, just make the system more robust. And the team has invested a tremendous amount of time and energy in accomplishing that goal. And it's increasingly robust. We have instead of a single server at Rackspace, we have a grid of servers. If a node goes down, the game can reconstitute. We can continue play. We've also been honing the design of the UI. And my new rule of thumb is when no one complains about your UI, you've just about got it perfectly right. Right? So it's kind of interesting that the feedback has changed from the UI isn't working for me to different kinds of feedback, which has been really exciting. We have always embraced the notion of in-person and online play as being equal. I sometimes say it's like men and women. They're equal and different. So we are really excited to let everyone know that you can now claim credit towards your certification belt status in our certification program for the in-person games that you do. And for those of you who have not yet claimed credit, you should. You should log in, claim credit, because that's part of demonstrating your ability to think and act in a multidimensional way. We're really excited about this. We also published our first book in what we hope to be a book series called the Epic Win Book Series. You can buy it for a whopping 99 cents or get it free here. And this is how we sequence and create a series of games that flow together to solve a business problem. This is the Epic Win book series, and this is the first one out. We're probably going to write a second Epic Win book on large distributed team or enterprise retrospectives, because we're seeing this notion of employee dissatisfaction and this lack of surveys. And yesterday I was at the hotel gym, and I read the paper, and there's this growing movement of instant surveys for employees. That is, I don't think it's going to last. Because people don't want to be bombarded with a question every single time they log into the corporate intranet. So the trick will be, how do we really get into substantive feedback and process improvement? We're really excited about Alexander Osterwalder's new book. We've been collaborating with Alexander a long time. Alexander is a trained facilitator. He's been through the class. He's a certified collaboration architect. And he uses our stuff for his company. And he decided that when he was writing the value proposition design book, he called me up. He's like, hey, I'm going to put innovation games in the book because I use them. Like, that's awesome. So now the innovation games are in, they're being broadened, and we're really excited about that. Really excited about that. We've also made a number of improvements to the user interface. The team rewrote the project organizer and made substantial improvements in our ability to manage the artifacts. Yeah, don't you love it, Deb? Okay, give the dev team a hand, everyone. Come on. They have been doing such amazingly good stuff. We've got manual stop games so the games can run for a long time. We've also added secure guest lists so that you can have a high degree of confidence over the authentication of your players. You know who they are, you know where they're coming from, and you have a lot of options there about organizing that work. Tomorrow you're going to hear a little bit more, but we've been testing our methods. I know this slide is impossible to read. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but this is actually drawn from some research from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology that formally compared by a feature for project portfolio prioritization to traditional methods. And you can see that traditional methods scored, it's okay for involvement, right? We scored much better. But in terms of this notion of, did you find the process enjoyable? And again, think of enjoyment as engagement, right? This is translated from the German, right? We got to 100% feeling engaged in the process. There's a lot of opportunity there. We're really excited about that. Okay, so what will the near future bring? So what's like the near-term horizon? What are the things that we've already made public statements about we're going to be working on that you should know about? And some of you have heard this, but it's good for everyone to hear this. First is we're going to work on what we call enterprise accounts and automation. When you build things in this kind of lean startup, minimum viable product process or approach, you get something up and running, and then you find that there's a lot of manual stuff that you're doing to make it work. And then as you realize that what you started with was effective, you want to automate and improve and streamline. So we're going to be working on moving from minimum viable to automated and self-serve. And an example of this would be for the enterprise customers who want to know how the system is doing. The current process is, hey, Dan, can you run a report for me? And then we email it, and you guys plow through it. We want to make that so that you get what you need from a dashboard. And we did a great game yesterday where we got the insights that we needed to build the dashboard and build that out. Same thing with automation. So for things like the qualified instructors, helping them enter in the people that they've trained and give credits and stuff like that, just making it more automated, which of course benefits us as much. The second is we're super excited. In Q1, we're going to be kicking off the rewrite of the visual collaboration game platform. And there's a tremendous backlog of ideas. We're going to take all of these ideas and we're going to process them and synthesize them and build it out. We've also had some hands raised to have co-development partners in this process, right, Mandy? And we're going to engage our customers and go through that process, and we're going to be very excited about that. And the last thing is, this is the last summit that you can attend, because you'll be able to go to Play Camp instead. Yay! So, again, it's really fun that my dear friend and colleague Scott is here. Scott was among the people who created Product Camp. Has anyone heard of Product Camp? Product Camp is the world's largest series of unconferences. We created Product Camp in 2008, and it has spread. So we're going to do the same thing. We're merging innovation games into the Play Camp brand. Play Camp brand is going to go around the world. We've got Play Camps already scheduled for March 23rd and 24th in London, and then probably the week before or the week after in Paris. We're working on a Play Camp in South America, and there's a few cities in the US. So you're going to see smaller and more numerous Play Camps. And we hope to make these available in locations around the world so we can continue to broaden our horizon. Now, in the goal of multidimensional thinking, the part of the reason we wanted to move away from Innovation Games Summit, which is innovation games, to Play Camp, so that we can continue to broaden and include other forms of play that we find valuable in business. Nancy's an expert on a lot of different modalities or styles of play, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. And part of the reason we want to do the Play Camp brand is to broaden that. So those are the near-term future. You know, around Q2, we're going to pop our head up and see what's going on, and then we'll kind of make some course adjustments and improvements about where we want to head next. And of course, that will be with your involvement and feedback. And then I'm going to talk finally a little bit about hopes and dreams. Some of the things that have been kicking around for so long, but they're still really critical. I mentioned this notion of moving from demographics into psychographics. And we've got, you know, are you familiar with lead user research from MIT? Some people maybe, yes or no. The interesting thing about the MIT research is they've never been able to predict who a lead user is. It's always retrospective analysis. But what if we could? What if we could look at the pattern of behavior around lead users and find the right ones? What if we could look at the Curtin Adapter Innovator Scale and understand your preference for structure and problem solving and match you into the right game? There's so much opportunity here. How do we find the right people to play the games? How do we get the right people? We also want to have more and better analytics. We touched upon that yesterday in our customer design jam, but how do we improve the output and the analysis of the data? So if I do, and some people have seen me do what I call my death zone of data slide, where if you have a few games, you should just download the data and read it. But what if we catch the tiger by the tail and you do 1,000 buy a feature games with your customers? And you really want to process the chat logs to figure out which of the features excited them the most. Well, no one's going to read all that. But we have tools that can parse that. We have classifiers and sentiment analyzers and other kinds of tools. So our company is not going to be creating those things from scratch. We're the company that's good at getting the data, and there are a lot of companies that are good at analyzing the data once you get it, and you'll see that merge over time. This year, we were really excited to release what we call Baby Bot. Baby Bot is the thing that you see in Buy a Feature when you log in for the first time now that kind of guides you into play. We're over time going to continue to make Baby Bot, and Baby Bot's going to grow up. And we're going to have Facilibots that will help you guide players in through play to get to the best outcomes. And it will be augmented, and it will help in that regard. Because we know how to do some of this work. And then finally, we're going to see, and I've said this, and people have said I'm crazy, and that's okay, because sometimes I am. They said it was crazy in the 50s to have a chief marketing officer, and they said it was crazy in the 90s to have a chief intellectual property officer. And guess what happened in corporate America? We have chief marketing officers, and we have chief intellectual property officers. We will see the emergence of the chief gaming officer. That was your cue to clap. And someone in this room, for the companies you're working with, could be that person, could be that role. And it's going to be really important, because not just with what we do, but what the gamification movement is doing, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, you can't have that much power without having some thought behind it. How do we leverage that and harness that? So we also want to change the world. If all we're doing is making a buck, that's great, but for me, it's actually not enough. And I know it's not enough for you because you're in this room. And we want to talk about how we change the world. So we've got our nonprofit, Every Voice Engaged Foundation. This was our 4th year in 2014, our 4th year of doing San Jose budget games. Big breakthrough this year. After 3 years of success with in-person games, the city was agreed to let us go online too. So we did both in-person and online with facilitators from around the world. 7 different states and 3 different countries had people participate, flying in on their own dime into San Jose, California to work on this. And when we went online, half of the games that were facilitated for citizens in San Jose were facilitated by facilitators who lived in Europe. And you ask them why, and because they're trying to bring this into their communities. Jürgen de Smet, I don't have a slide on this. Jürgen de Smet is a brilliant facilitator. He's part of the Holacracy and Management 3.0 movement with Jürgen Appello. He's brought budget games and has done 2 rounds of budget games in Belgium, in Kortrijk, Belgium. We've done Warschip, Poland. We've done Missoula, Montana. And we're slowly growing. And this is the project that Laura is personally spearheading at Centennial. Man, I wish we had, more ability to do more philanthropic stuff. We're pretty much optimized that we can do one at a time. So the one that we're doing now is working on the California water crisis. And you'll see a little bit of that tomorrow, where we want to try and get at least 100,000 Californians creating an understanding of how they might make progress on solving the water crisis, and then take that data to Sacramento so that we can give our politicians something to act against as opposed to a survey, which sucks. Because surveys suck. You can say that out loud. Surveys suck. And then with Kettering, we have a goal of 1 million Americans focused on wicked social problems. I'll expand on that. But Kettering has been doing this for 30 years, and they've got guides and content for problems ranging from bullying to education to immigration reform, tax reform, net neutrality. Amazing stuff. Now, we know that when you move from your comfort zone in that multidimensional space into a new space, you're taking on risk. We know that. We may take some inspiration from our friend in the morning on risk.
They used to say if a man could fly, he'd have wings. But he did fly. He discovered he had to. Do you wish that the first Apollo mission hadn't reached the moon, or that we hadn't gone on to Mars and then to the nearest star? That's like saying you wish that you still operated with scalpels and sewed your patients up with catgut, like your great-great-great-great-grandfather used to. I'm in command. I could order this. But I'm not. Because Dr. McCoy is right in pointing out the enormous danger potential in any contact with life and intelligence as fantastically advanced as this. But I must point out that the possibilities, the potential, for knowledge and advancement is equally great. Risk. Risk is our business. That's what the Starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her. You may dissent without prejudice. Do I hear a negative vote?
If I could, I would have replaced intelligence with game, because I know that's what you're facing when you go to the business and you say, let's play a game. But for us, I have one question. Are there any negative votes? Play on, my friends.